This video is designed to help you understand the historical skill of sourcing. First thing you want to do when you source a document is read the complete document. Side note, this document has been modified and inappropriate language has been taken out. Okay, so let's go ahead and read the document. How were slaves treated in the South? Document A, modified spelling. This is an interview with William Colbert, a 93-year-old former slave from Alabama. The interview was conducted by John Morgan Smith in 1937. Smith worked for the Federal Writers Project. The Federal Writers Project, FWP, was established in 1935 as part of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal. The project, a branch of the Work Progress Administration, the WPA, was designed to employ writers, editors, historians, and researchers who were out of work during the Great Depression. Initially, the FWP's main project was to write guidebooks that would inform readers about the history, culture, economy, and different areas of the country. Soon, however, the FWP took on a variety of writing and research projects that would document other aspects of American culture at the time. Interviewer: Well, Uncle Will, tell me something about slave days. Was your master good to you? William Colbert: No, sir, he wasn't good to none of us ends. All of us ends around hated to be bought by him because he was so mean. One day I remember my brother January was caught overseeing a girl in the next plantation. Well, sir, when the master found out that he was an hour late, he got mad as a hive of bees. So when brother January came home, the master took him down his long mural skinner and tied him with rope to that pine tree and stripped his shirt off and said, Now, N, I'm going to teach you some sense. With that, he started laying out the lashes. January was a big, fine-looking N, the finest I've ever seen. He was just 4 years older than me, and when the master began beating him, January never said a word. The master got madder because he couldn't make January hollow. What's the matter with you, N? He said. Don't you hurt? January, he never said nothing, and the master kept beating until streams of blood started flowing down January's chest. But he never hollowed. His lips were quivering, and his body was shaking, but his mouth never opened, and all the while I sat on my mommy's and pappy's steps crying. The N was all gathered, and some of them couldn't stand it. They had to go inside of their cabins. Vocabulary: long mural skinner, large whip. Okay, so we read the document. Now we always want to look at the author and the date. And it says right up here, John Morgan Smith, 1937. But then you got to say, well, who was John Morgan Smith? He was a writer, probably a historian, for the Federal Writers Project that took place during the Depression. To whom is the document for? Who's the audience? Well, we kind of know from reading the top that the audience was the American people. So it was paid by the government and was going to be distributed to the American people. Finally, we got to look, is there bias and is it a reliable document? First of all, let's talk about whether it's reliable. When it comes to answering how were slaves treated in the South, interviewing someone who was a slave, you would say the document's very reliable. Now, no document is ever 100% reliable. This was a long time after the man was a slave, and it's only one perspective. So later on, when we learn the historical skill of corroboration, we'll look to see if we can find other documents that corroborate what Mr. Goldberg said. Now about the bias. Is it bias? Remember, bias is prejudice in favor or against one thing, person, or a group compared with another. So it doesn't necessarily mean the guy's wrong, but is there bias? Is he bitter? Is he holding a grudge? And I think you would have to say there is some bias in here. And you look for something in the document that shows bias, which I'll show you when I show what I wrote up. Alright, so let's go ahead then and take a look at what I wrote. And remember, you always want to go over here and do the number 4, because why not get the 100 on the test? So read that and then answer the questions. So here's what I wrote. The author of the document was John Morgan Smith. The document was created in 1937. The author is a writer for the Federal Writers Project, so the audience will be the general public. I know this because on top of the document it states that he worked for the Federal Writers Project. In answering the historical question, how were slaves treated in the South, this document would be reliable because it's an interview of a former slave who lived in Alabama as a slave. There is bias in the document. The former slave most likely resented being a slave, so therefore told only the most awful stories about being a slave. For example, William Colbert states, January, he never said nothing, and the master kept beating till little streams of blood started flowing down January's chest, but he never hollered. Colbert relies truly on horrible story to highlight the brutality of slavery. And don't forget, you always want to quote the document. So why do you think it's biased? Because he's so angry about slavery, he's only going to tell the worst stories. Where does he tell the worst stories? In the quote. All right, hopefully that explains the historical skill of sourcing. If you have other questions, please come see your teacher during Spartan Plus, and we'd be glad to help you.